My name is Cindy Holladay. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today, everyone that's in person and online, to my talk about thinking outside the framework. What I want to do today is I want to kind of discuss the benefits of expanding the use of the e-consent framework beyond just consenting. I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about the clinical trial that I work on, but the purpose for that is just to sort of give you a concrete idea of how I adapted it. But what I would really like is for you to think about how you could maybe use this, how this might be useful in your job or your studies or your whatever it is that you do. And then I was hoping we could have maybe a discussion and questions and answers at the end. So like I said, I'm Cynthia Holladay. I'm a clinical research coordinator. I work at the School of Medicine in the Department of Pediatrics. I work on a clinical trial. It's called IMPACT. What it is a multi-site cluster randomized controlled trial. The purpose is to evaluate a pediatric oncology communication intervention. What this study focuses on is the early intervention of palliative care and end-of-life communication for parents of children that have high-risk cancers. I just wanted to do a brief acknowledgement. This study is funded by the NIH. It is a multiple principal investigator study, so that on this study, we do have 3 principal investigators. The lead principal investigator is Dr. Susan Perkins. She works here at IU with me. The other 2 principal investigators are Dr. Karen Moody and Dr. Verna Ferguson. So like I said, this is a multi-site study. We have 7 sites. I wanted to just sort of give you an idea of the sites. IU is the lead site. So in addition to recruiting here at Riley Children's Hospital, we also serve as the reviewing IRB. We handle all regulatory matters. We handle the budgets, the subawards, and we're also the data collection and analysis center. So each of those sites has a research team at it. And so each of those research team includes at least 1 principal investigator, an RN intervener, and a physician intervener. We call them a dyad, a site project manager, and then what we call an evaluator. This is a person who does data collection, and that person is blinded to study arm. So I just want to just briefly talk about there's regulatory requirements that we have to comply with. So as a multi-site trial, what we would like to do is, because of good clinical practices, but also requirements from the IU Simon Cancer Center, every time we amend our protocol, we need to train and document that training for all staff that is appropriate on any amendments that we make. So as you can imagine, I'm on a trial that's across the country. There are some issues with logistical issues and other issues with trying to do that. Currently, what we've been using is a PDF form. So either the sites can print that out or they can sign it as an Adobe sign. But what I've really found is that this system and this process is cumbersome. It's taking up a lot of my time. It's taking up a lot of the time of my sites. And so I just had to think, like, is there some way that we can adapt the e-consent framework so that we can use it to fit our documentation needs and resolve some of these issues like eligibility and the just extreme amount of time that it takes to get this signed. As if there's someone who's slow in the process to signing it, that's holding up everyone else down the line. So I thought, is there some way we can adapt the e-consent framework to use this for this purpose? So I just want to just give a brief overview, just in case you're not familiar. The e-consent framework, it's a platform that you can use to consent patients. We use this on the IMPACT trial or research subjects. You can do it on site or at home. And the benefit to this is that rather than using paper or like PDF documentation, you can just send them a survey. You can send it, in their email. You can do it on a mobile phone or a tablet. And so that makes it a lot easier, especially for a trial across the country. So how do you have access to the e-consent framework? Well, the e-consent framework that we've been using, the study requires, it requires signatures for ours, and so they have to sign it. So we already have an e-consent framework created for consenting participants. So the easiest way for me to have access to the e-consent framework was for the person who created it to go under other functionality and copy this project. What's really important and something that I want to emphasize is to make sure that you get all of the lights that you need, and you can see at the bottom so that you can adapt the project to whatever it is that you want to do. You can also create your own if that's easier for you. But for me, that framework was already in existence and I just wanted to adapt it to a different specific need. So I'm going to talk here about adapting the e-consent framework itself. So once I had access to the project, I went on the menu on the left side, which is probably my favorite menu. And I clicked on designer. And so then that brings you to this page, the online designer page. So you can see where the instrument name used to be something like e-consent framework or e-consent. And I've changed it to protocol training log. And what I did was I clicked on the pencil, and you can see REDCap's already helping me. Here, just click here and you can modify your instruments. And so I clicked on the pencil, and what that allows you to do is it brings this up to you. And so now you can adapt it to implement whatever parameters for whatever forms or whatever you need. And so I just want to point out here, there's a pencil again, so I can click on that and that means I can adapt site name. There's branching logic. So if there's, I didn't particularly need to use that on this project, but if it's something that you do need to use, you can click on that and create branching logic. If this is like an amazing tab for you and you're like, man, I would love more of these, you can just hit the copy button. It will make more of them for you. Conversely, if you hate this and you're like, I don't even need this, you can go ahead and delete it. So you can adapt this to whatever it is that you need. Something that I would really recommend and something that I put into mine is that a version date. So and I'm going to talk a little bit more on the next slide about how to keep track of different versions, but you'll want to keep track of the date of this form or whatever it is that you're using in case you need to update it later. So our written signature e-consent framework does create it's a framework because it has two kind of components to it. So for my purpose, I really didn't need the second component, which is where staff or someone else needs to sign it, but because I only needed one signature. And you can see here, one of the issues that we had was that some of the staff that we needed to sign the Adobe did not understand, and there was multiple steps to signing an Adobe, and they would get kind of caught up there. And I feel like the add signature on REDCap, you can do that on your phone, you can do it from anywhere, and it's much more intuitive what you're supposed to do. It's not that multiple step Adobe, and that wasn't something that was required for our study. So that was something that we could replace this with. So here I want to talk about what to do if you have multiple versions. There is an auto archiver and e-consent framework survey option, and that adds two things to a typical, survey taking process. It adds an extra verification, but it also adds, and this is what was important for me, a static copy of the responses, and that is stored in the project's file repository as a PDF. So once they have signed it, whatever version it is, it stays there. And then if I want to change the version later, that will still stay static. So in order to make sure that is enabled, you'll want to go into Designer again, one of my favorites. And instead of clicking on the protocol training log, that little pencil that was there, you'll want to click on survey settings. And then you'll want to make sure that is enabled. And then when you, because you can see it can be disabled, you can have just the auto archiver. And then this is what I was talking about. It says e-consent version, but what I use this for is the version of whatever my form is. And this is how I know which version people have signed. And I'll show you on the next screen how to keep track of that. Oh, I wanted to mention, so once you're pretty happy with your project, you have most of it complete, you'll want to move that project into production. What I've found is that if you have minor things to update, like maybe you misspelled something or you want to rename something, usually those can be done pretty quickly, but some things, if it's more major, it might require approval from REDCap once you've moved it into production. So one of the most important things for me was, okay, so I've sent this form out, how many people have completed it? How do I keep track of that? So, and which version have they signed? So the first thing I do is I go to my favorite part of the menu and I click on File Repository. There's a PDF survey archive here. You can see 12 files. So I know, okay, somebody has signed it, at least 12 people. And it will give you a list here, and it'll tell you the name of the people that have signed it, their record number, the survey, their name. It will also give you that PDF that they signed. So if you want, you can click on it and make sure that they're signing the correct version or that they actually signed it.
You want to hide these participants over the upper left.
Oh, this? Is that what it wants? Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so like I said, the study has 7 sites, so I was a little nervous to do this across all 7 sites at once. So what I did was I talked with the regulatory entity to make sure that the e-consent framework would be an acceptable form of documentation for what we needed it for. And after I got their approval, I piloted it across our largest site, which is our MD Anderson site. And the results of that pilot was that MD Anderson completed the training log an entire day earlier than it previously had. I had a discussion with our site in Georgia, and I let them know that there was an electronic option, and they requested to be able to use that over the PDF. And within 4 days of it being sent out, 6 staff members had already responded, whereas previously I had sat for a month with no signatures. And so in a 9-day period, 85% of our Georgia site staff had been able to sign the e-consent, and it was fully completed in early May. So I asked for some feedback because again, before I move this out across the whole study, I want to make sure, like, is this working? Is this good? And so the site PI at Georgia really loved it. She said it's really saving a lot of time and effort on their part, and this was their preference for sure. So what are the benefits to doing this, right? Oh my gosh, it saves so much staff time. I have to just express to you, every time we would amend our protocol, which doesn't happen all the time, but it happens, right? I have to get 75 signatures across the country each time. This takes a lot of my time. I also have to create the form, and then I have to update it, because we also change staff, right? So I have to, it was a lot of my time, and then I would pass it on to the sites. And then it was a lot of time there for their program managers to either do this in person or try to find these very, very busy clinicians in the clinic and try to get them to sign it. So, it was just very time consuming. So making it more efficient has really freed up my time to be able to do other tasks. It gets it done quicker. And so I had to think, like, is this really adding value? How much time we're spending in getting these signatures? Is this making the study safer or better in some way? And it really wasn't. This was a place where we could really cut the time down and it would be beneficial. It also reduces filing time because after the sites finally got it all signed, they had to email it to me, and I have to organize it and upload it to somewhere so that everyone can have access to it. It's already filed. Once the person has signed it, it's filed in REDCap. And the fact that I can create one REDCap project with multiple versions means that I can give any regulator that comes to audit us, I can just give them access to that one REDCap project, and they'll see all of the documentation that they need. So that's really helpful as well. So it might have some limitations. It might have limitations on how broadly this kind of adaptation can be used, because depending on the regulatory standards that you need to meet, this might not qualify. That's why I really recommend speaking with the regulatory entity and making sure this kind of thing would be acceptable. And then since it is no longer being emailed to me or in my inbox, it can be easy to forget to make sure that everyone has signed it. And so it's just really important to put in place an organizational system so that, you can make sure that everyone is completing it. So some lessons that I learned is, you really want to make sure you engage whoever the regulatory entity is really early so that you can, personally, I would have preferred to have started off this way, not messed around with the paper if we didn't have to. I also give access in the project to the project manager. So you want to make sure you give access to anyone who might need to see who has completed it, because they help me make sure that it gets completed. And then also obviously make sure that auto archiving or the auto archiving, plus e-consent is turned on, because that's really helpful for versioning. So, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you turn on the auto archiving stream, or you have to do it?
Please repeat.
Oh, okay. She would like to know if you can turn on the auto archiving midstream, or if what'd you say? Or if
Start it from the very
if you need to start it from the very beginning. I think you can probably turn it on midstream, but then there will only be whoever does it from there on. Like it won't be retroactive. But so like part of what I wanted to do at the end is sort of give time for questions. But then I also kind of wanted to see, like one of my colleagues calls this my e-consent hacks. And so I just think it's really interesting to see how different people use this, right? Because maybe you guys don't have a study that's anything like this, or maybe you don't have a project that's anything like this, but there could be something else in your job where you're getting signatures or you need, people to complete things that that would be creative that you could use it for. So I sort of wanted to open the room up and obviously also the chat and see if you guys could help brainstorm and think of other ideas like that. Something else I thought about is every time we hire our research staff, we have a position description that they have them sign so that they understand what their tasks are. And so that again was like a paper and it was just like problematic. And so I also converted that to an e-consent and it's just been very helpful and very easy. Because especially if you're just having like most of our meetings are obviously Zoom. And so I can just put it in the chat. I can chat you and say, hey, I noticed you didn't sign can you just sign it right now while we're sitting at this meeting? And it's just really it gets it done. So anyways, I would just really like to open up the floor to questions and any ideas that you guys have. But I did want to give a special thanks to Allie and Lane, my colleagues, because they really helped me with this, with input, and Allie especially with the red cap stuff. So I just really appreciate it. But thanks. I'll start with you in the back. Go ahead.
Thank you, Cindy.
Of course.
So mind blown. I'm thinking about this form that we always collect. It's a photo release form.
Yes. Yeah, we have an auto recording form,
Oh my God, I'm so
audio recording form.
And just.
got all the papers
we're
we'll
reading
use.
this.
Oh, yes. I'll repeat it.
Sure.
Sure. She was sharing that they have a photo release form that they use. And is it paper that you use?
Oh,
And it's paper. We have something similar. We have an audio recording for people who aren't participating in the study, but they might be at a study session. So we need them to release that we're allowed to audio record them. And that is something else that we use this for. It's
Great
just
idea.
much easier. I think that's a great idea. That's a great idea. And then you had a question?
So I have a question, yeah. I don't know if you can speak to this, but I noticed in Brenda's talk earlier that she showed two different examples of signatures. One where you just type your name versus I'm guessing what you were showing is the one where you kind of do the actual signature. What is the IRB stance on like when you should use either? Does it matter?
I can probably.
Question.
The question is, what is the IRB stance based on, can you type your name? Can you sign your name? And they'll specify that when you apply in this. So like I've been on various studies. So some of them only require verbal consent. Some of them require written consent. So it sort of depends on the risk in the study. And the IRB will let you know what's required. And then you'll just have to update your red cap. Like we have to have a written, it can't be just a type for ours, but it might depend. It probably depends on the study. I hate to give that it depends answer, but.
The consent is auto set up for signature, so then you would have to change it.
The one that I have is, so that's why I think oh, I'm sorry. She said the e-consent is signed up for the auto signature. The one that I have is, but I think that you can edit it or or copy a different project where it's not set up that way. For me, the signature is just so easy. Like you could even do it on your phone. It's just much easier than the Adobe. I had to help, people through it because it's so many steps and maybe it saves and maybe it doesn't. Like you don't have any of that with the e-consent. So that's really great. Did anyone else have anything? Yeah, go ahead. I didn't do that. I'm sorry. The question is, have you set up any alerts so that you know when people have signed it? I didn't do that for the reason that there's 75 of them that need to sign it. And so for me, it's easier to just like, I have an organizational system where I put in my calendar, like check to see if, this site has completed it. Just because my email would just be full. But I think if you have a smaller, amount of people, then that might be more helpful. I do have alerts set up for a lot of other things, but just not for this. Yes. Oh, I love that. So someone mentioned that they could use this for SOP acknowledgement. I love it. Because it's that kind of thing where it's like you just need to document it, like you've trained them or they've read the SOP. And I just find that it's not adding value to spend a lot of time and effort if you could do it in an easier way. And still get the documentation that you need, then it's really helpful. Please go ahead again. Yes, I'm sure it's the Elaine. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So Elaine, and she had mentioned this to me when I was discussing this with her, and I thought it was a good idea, was when we do the appraisal forms, right? And then you have to sign it and your supervisor has to sign it. That might be a good use for this because the framework already has the 2 signatures set up into it. And there's just no reason to spend a lot of time and effort worrying about how to get the signature, as long as you get it, is what I think. So, oh, you can go ahead.
I have 2 ideas. Well, 1 idea, 1 question. So we have I want to thank you for having me think outside the box because I do have to collect signatures for a confidentiality agreement. It's not very official. It's not IRB or HIPAA or regulatory or anything. It's just something we do. And so it'd be a lot easier just to, in their welcoming email, here's the link, go do the thing. But my second question is also for you and the whole group is, has anyone tried using this for something operational like consents to treat or releases of information? We really want to do that, and IU's on board, but I'm not sure IU Health is. So I'm wondering if anyone has any experiences with that.
Okay, I'm just going to repeat what you said. So she said she really liked to thank us for talking about thinking outside the box. And she has some ideas for what she can use it for. And then also she was wondering if anyone has used this, adapted it for consent to treat. And what was the other example you gave? Release of information, like an ROI. Has anyone used it for that purpose? Anything in the chat? Oh, go ahead. So he said suggestion of a delegation of authority log. And I have to admit, I love that idea. I would also like to, but I just couldn't figure out, it has a lot, at least mine has a lot to it. And I couldn't figure out how to get that into there, but that's honestly one of my next projects because that would be great. Because those are another thing that takes forever to get turned in. Go ahead. I love that. Our delegation of authority log is like, oh, he said that he's playing around with using this for the delegation of authority log. And right now they have it where the coordinator and the staff and the PI each get an email so that they can sign it, right? Or whatever it is that they need to do. I love that. I'm hoping maybe you could email me about that later. You could email all of us about that later. We would love that. She asked if you use automated invitations and he said yes. Done. I love that. Well, I think that I have 1 minute, so I'm just going to wrap it up. Does anyone have any last questions? Go ahead.
File repository. So you said 75 forms. Does it look like a directory? Like how would I find?
Yeah, it looks like a directory. Yeah, I made actually a different project for each site. So it's not like, so I pieced it out so it's easier to me. I'm like, I know Georgia needs 13.
Folder.
Yeah, but yeah, I found that to be very easy. Well, thank you guys so much. I really love this discussion. I feel like I learned a lot, and thank you for letting me have this talk. I appreciate it.